Hi, Bill.
Hello.
Okay, 5:05. I will start the recording.
Recording in progress.
And attendance. Caitlin, you're here. I see you're here. Kim is not yet. I'm sure she'll tune in, but she's not here yet. But we'll go ahead and get started. And I am here. And he's not a voting member, but I anticipated maybe Dave Schneider would be here. He is not. So we'll go ahead. I call to order this meeting of the Finance Committee of Pullman Community Montessori, May 14th, 2024, 5:05 p.m. First thing, grounding questions for the Finance Committee. This is what we're here for. First, do we believe that our internal policies and procedures are being followed? I have a little discussion of that coming up, about 10 minutes worth of tops. But that is a significant responsibility of the Finance Committee, because if we don't have internal policies and procedures operational and operating effectively, then the financials aren't reliable. What is our current cash balance? And are we confident in our ability to meet short-term cash needs? I discussed that with Matt the other day over email, and it sounds like we're projected to have about a $200,000 cash balance at the end of the school year. Is that right, Matt?
Yeah, that's before any, yes, that is correct.
Yeah, as it stands today, of course, there are surprises. And that $200,000 is, I did not figure out how many days cash, but it's also lumpy. Not all weeks are the same. So that's a yes at this point. How are actuals to budget performing? We'll be looking at that in a few minutes. Material variances are considered $10,000 and 10%, plus or minus. And I tip the hat, if I had one on, to Matt, because he'll be leading that discussion today. I did last month. And how do our big projects affect financial affairs? And we don't have a lot of big projects right now. We had a successful t-shirt drive by the parent group. Thank you for that. We continue to apply for some grants. And we have a little discussion coming up in a little bit about fundraising and parent councils, and what a PTO is, a PTA, and a parent council. Okay. Questions so far? Grounding questions. We are grounded. All right, welcome all. Welcome, Caitlin. Like I said, I think Kim will be along presently, but we'll proceed. Oh, yeah, Kim is hopping on. And we'll catch Dave up too. Welcome to Geo Growth Partners. We have Matt here. He is the person who's worked most closely with PCM since when, Matt? The beginning?
Close to, yeah. I helped with the application, and since then, yeah.
Okay, and Bill, also with Geo Growth Partners. I believe you are its founder, right, Bill?
Correct, yep.
Okay. Hello, Dave, and welcome. So Dave Schneider is joining us. I appreciate that. And Geo Growth Partners provides a strategic alliance, CFO services. Well, hello, it's Kim and Dave. Great, thank you. So welcome, committee members. Welcome, guests from the community. I appreciate your being here. I appreciate your interest and your questions. Oh, gotta let Katie in now. Good. Waiting for her face to materialize. Oh, there's Katie. Hi, Katie. Katie also with the Geo Growth Partners, and you live in the East Coast time zone as well, don't you, Katie?
I do, but I'm actually in Seattle this week.
Oh, that's right. So you're in the same time zone, and I'm not sure where you are, Bill, but I'm grateful. It might be after hours where you are too. Okay, meeting environment. Meetings of the Finance Committee are not subject to the Washington Open Public Meetings Act, which means we're not required to make them public or record them, but for the sake of transparency and openness, we really want to do that. And I'm game to do questions and answers as we go, provide they fit within the scope of this committee, the Finance Committee, and are to the financials we'll be discussing today. So again, I appreciate you. Thanks for being here. Approve the minutes. Let's see. All right. Caitlin, Kim, did you get a chance to review the minutes? Okay. Will one of you make a motion to approve them? Subject to any grammatical changes?
I motion to approve them.
Second? Uh-oh, do we lose Kim and Dave? No, there's Kim. Okay. Kim,
Yeah,
do
you
you
got it.
second? Okay, thank you. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. That's the minutes. Let's see. Finance Committee guidelines. I have three things to run by you for information only. No action needed. One is a discussion of internal controls. That first grounding question, are we following our procedures and controls? I think we need to know what that means. So from a kind of an academic perspective, I will offer you a discussion of that. And then have a look at Board on Track, because I'd like you to see where in the public portal recordings of meetings are stored, as well as the agenda. And then a clarification of the roles of PTAs, PTOs, parent associations. And Caitlin, thank you for requesting that. I think it's a very good place to discuss it right here. All right, internal controls. One moment, please. I thought I had this right up handy. First, while I look for this, has everybody here been able to access documents from the portal, or anybody unable to, I should say, because if you have, I'll get them right to you. Okay. Okay. Sorry for my dilatory ways. Now I'm going to share my screen and we'll go through this, and stop me at any point you have a question. It's, like I said, from an academic perspective, what are these internal controls that are part of the board or the committee grounding documents? Okay. Can you see that? It says at the top, internal controls. Is it visible to you? Okay, good. Thank you. Internal controls. This is from taken largely from publicly reporting companies, which we're not, but that represents definitely a best practices set of practices. So an internal control is a plan for ensuring that our financials can be relied upon with reasonable assurance. Now, that reasonable assurance can mean different things to different organizations, but it's basically, we want our financial statements to be materially correct. So our internal controls are the tools that help us get there. There are these principles. Internal controls say who's responsible to do what kinds of records will be kept, and for how long. Tell us to insure our assets, bond our employees where appropriate, not always appropriate. It tells us to keep separate record keeping, which we do. It tells us to have a segregation of duties so that no one person controls too much of a process, and too much means it's a possible control problem, which can lead to errors or worse, fraud. Use tech controls. Those are usually preventive controls, very good. Use technology to establish good internal controls, and then have regular reviews and audits, which we do. We have regular audits from a CPA firm as well as the state of Washington. So those are some of the principles behind internal controls. There are three kinds. Preventive. Now, preventive control is like access to, QuickBooks Online, for example. I can read it, but I can't write to it. That means I can't get in there and mess up anything or do anything. All I can do is read. That's a preventive control. Technology prevents me from accessing the live records of PCM. A detective controls after the fact. That's what we're doing right now. A detective control is review of financials, for example, and there are others. A detective control is review of bank reconciliations and so on after the fact. They're not as strong as preventive controls, but in most cases, that's all we have. And then correct is when we find a control problem, like we forgot to get a proper authorization on an invoice. Oops, it happened again. Then we need to invoke a corrective control, be it training or additional people involved in the process. Those are the types of controls. Questions so far? I know I'm going kind of fast, but it's important background to answer that first question. There are two aspects to internal controls. One is design of controls, and that is the responsibility of the board. That we have a design is the responsibility of the board. To design them in the first place is a management/board responsibility. And this is the plan. We make a plan for enough internal control to make sure that our finances are accurate, timely, reliable, and legal, as we saw a few minutes ago. Once we have an effective design, then the second aspect is, do those controls operate effectively? We can have the best plan in the world, but if we aren't operating according to that plan, we do not have effective controls. So this is management's responsibility, the operation of controls, and the board is responsible for management, so it's the board's as well. So the question is, do our transactions employ the controls named in the plan? When somebody audits our internal controls, such as our CPA firm, they take the design in one hand, which is our finance manual, and the operation on the other hand is what they test through field work, looking at invoices and so on. Okay, when something goes wrong, there are three kinds of deficiencies in internal control. Most deficiencies are control deficiencies, which means, oops, we forgot to sign an invoice in order for it to be paid. Or, oops, we have a missing document behind a check. Or, oops, we mispaid somebody through erroneously calculating their hours and so on. These are minor errors, although they can escalate. They will always be there. We will always have control deficiencies because we're human. Humans go on vacation, they forget, they miscommunicate. We will always have control deficiencies. If we have a pattern, such as in revenue, we frequently miscalculate our allocations and so on as in regard to grants. If it's a frequent thing, then it can escalate. And so if control deficiencies show a repetitive pattern and they're numerous, then that can be a more serious deficiency, which is a significant deficiency. And these are SEC, Sarbanes-Oxley public reporting words, but I believe they apply equally here. A significant deficiency is big enough and concerning enough that it adversely affects our processes, and there's a fair chance that we'll have a misstatement that's not inconsequential, which means we could make faulty decisions based on it. So control deficiency is less, a significant deficiency is more, and significant deficiencies should be reported to the board. Recall, control deficiencies should be reported to management. Significant deficiencies should be reported to the board. They suggest that there's not an effective design, for example. Now, the golly whopper, the worst is a material weakness. I worked in an organization that had one of these, but it's like a significant deficiency, but it really cast doubt on the fidelity of the basic financial statements. It means we're not watching well, we're not booking accruals well. There's some pretty significant deficiency in our processes that like I said, makes us cast doubt on the whole financial statement. And they should be reported in the auditor's report. I don't know if that applies for us, for a nonprofit, for a public organization, but I believe it's a good practice. That's kind of the hierarchy then. Significant deficiencies, control deficiency, there are a lot of those, we're human. Significant deficiencies should be very, very rare, and material weaknesses, oh, we hope never. Now, back to question number one in our agenda. Are our internal controls effective? There are many things to consider. It's not black and white, it's a mosaic. Here they are. Do we have financial policies and procedures? Are our controls designed well? I believe so. I have been through most, not all, of the finance manual, and it appears to me that our controls are designed effectively. Another thing to consider is our partnership with Dual Growth Partners. We have a clear separation between the people who have authority to spend and commit the organization and those who do the accounting for it, and that is a strong control. So thank you to our friends on the west side and, well, everywhere, Dual Growth Partners. Another thing to consider is monthly review of financials. That's what we're doing right now. That is an effective control because you ask questions, you look through them, you hold all of us accountable to make sure the financials are proper. Kim, you had quite a few questions this time, and I really appreciate that. Sorry, I couldn't answer them earlier in the day. The OPMA, the Washington Open Public Meetings Act, that is a strong control for a public organization because it means anybody in the public is able to make public record requests if they want more information and to in turn receive responsive documents. And that's a kind of accountability that I did not have in my private sector experience. So I appreciate it being here. The annual audit is a control because the auditors audit our internal controls. However, please note my weasel words down here, auditors are not responsible for controls, and a clean opinion is not an A+. If we got a clean opinion from our auditor, that doesn't mean our controls are solid. It means they didn't see anything to make them think otherwise. Controls are our responsibility, management and the board, not the auditors. Another one, staffing. Is our staffing ample or adequate, I should say? If so, we probably have enough people to maintain a good segregation of duties. So no one person controls too much of the process. But when we get short-staffed, that's where we start to see significant deficiencies or even material weaknesses because there aren't enough people to keep up the work. There aren't enough people to keep their roles separate. Compensating controls. This is, again, another compensating control. We examine the financials. And even if one of these other controls is weak, a compensating control, like examination of the financials, is strong. And finally, internal audit. That doesn't fit for our organization. As far as I know, we've never had an internal audit of internal controls. I'm not suggesting we should. It's something that maybe would be interesting to me at some point in the future, but that's not something we do. Many organizations do. All right, that's a quick summation, very quick summation of a complex topic, internal controls. Do you have any questions? Matt, I'm hitting you cold here, but do you have anything to add to that?
No, honestly, I would love to steal this so I can borrow this presentation for others. So thank you so much.
Well, sure, I'd be happy to share it. I did not put our logo on it, so it should be good to go. Okay, now we'll have a look at Board on Track. And this will be pretty quick. I just want to show you where from the public portal, I'm on the public Board on Track portal right here. And if you want to go back and see a recording or look at an agenda, you can do it from here by going to committee meetings, board meetings too, of course, but my shtick right now is the finance committee. So let's look at the last meeting about a month ago, a month and a day ago, something like that. Oh, I need to share this, sorry. There we go. Okay, can you see this? Board meetings, committee meetings? Great, thank you. We'll look at the one on the 15th, that's our last finance committee meeting, and see what we can see. What I'm going to show you is right here. You can see the agenda for the last meeting and the minutes for the last meeting. You've probably looked at those already. But what's new for the finance committee, indeed, I think for the organization, is documents. I click on documents and I have attached two documents. One is an acknowledgement in which I thank the provider of the video from the last meeting because I started recording it very late. Well, we won't look at that. Trust me on that. It's an acknowledgement and a thank you. And the other one out here is MP4. So that's the recording that was provided to me about, I think, 10 minutes into the meeting. I didn't start recording until about a half hour in. So again, I appreciate having that recording. And that's where the video can be seen. Board meeting videos are kept in YouTube. I have not done that here because we just have a more limited group. Okay, questions on that? All right. One more thing on clarifications, guidance. Let's see, and that is here we go. Okay, in here someplace I have a document. Here we go. I'm not sure how you pronounce this lady's name. She's very helpful. Bill, Matt, Katie, do you know?
Bailey.
Bailey?
Yep.
Oh my gosh, I bet she gets her name misspelled about 20 times a day. Bailey, thank you. Okay, my question, and Caitlin, again, thank you for encouraging me to get this done. What is a PTA versus a PTO versus a parent council? And here they are. Basically, a PTA is affiliation with a national network and often has its own bylaws. And there are fundraising guidelines. I don't know what it means. They may have to follow fundraising guidelines, but to be considered a PTA, there is here a link, and you can go to it if you would like to. I'm explaining more fully what a PTA is and how it works. It appears to me this is the more structured of the three kinds of groups. A PTO organization, I guess similar, but it's got its own policies and priorities. We note here, Bailey says Washington charters usually start with the PTO. They might become their own nonprofit. And then there's a self-assessment guide. I think, Kim, you had some questions about those that I have not yet been able to answer. The best way to fundraise for PTO is through the school's 501c3 status. And then a parent council, that's what our SCC is at this point. And the SCC does exactly this, works collaboratively with the administration and the board on this committee. Two of the people are on the parent council, Kim and Caitlin, and again, thank you. And what Bailey says here is all groups can fundraise. In this latest fundraiser by the SCC t-shirts, the check was sent directly to the school, and the parent council will be able to determine how it's used. Questions about those? Kim, you probably have spent more time on this than I have. Do you have anything to add?
So I know that for the PTOs, if we had a PTO, they would create their own bylaws, their own policies, and we would have to get the head of school's permission to create one. And with the PTAs, from what I've read and everything, they are more structured. They have more of that backing because you have to have them be set up through the national PTA and be signed up with that. And I know that the PTAs are more restrictive in the fact that from what I was reading, they kind of have to help the whole, and keep in mind the whole, the word is not coming to me, the whole district, instead of just a particular school.
Oh, okay.
Well, the PTOs are more for the particular school, and they have more say in what they fundraise for, and having more of that particular school's needs in mind. And so it is a lengthy process to go the PTO route. From what I've read, I'll have to go and look into it again. I did notice that with the 5,000 or the 50,000 per year before having to become that, I'll have to double check on that. 'Cause a lot of the stuff I was reading said you had to be a 501c3 and do that whole process kind of like through the school. It was a little complicated, but and then the parent councils are, from what I understand, a lot like booster clubs. They can kind of do like the smaller fundraising stuff, and they're usually more targeted for like specific clubs or specific things instead of the school in general, just like a specific thing at the school that they usually fundraise for or that they do things for. And then, yeah, and then the one thing I wasn't sure on is the self-assessment guide, and I don't know how to access that through the document sent, but
Okay.
that's kind of a crash course in what I've learned a little bit.
Thank you. So in the parent council and also among us on the board, we haven't always necessarily been clear on that. So I appreciate Bailey's clarification and yours too, Kim. Okay, questions on any of these? Internal controls, board on track, PTA, PTO, parent association. Okay, that takes us to April financials, and with my gratitude, Matt. You should be a co-host, so you should be able to share your screen. Or would you like me to put them up on my screen?
No, I got it. No worries.
Okay.
Thanks for offering that. Alrighty, so today we are reviewing PCM's April 2024. As a reminder, that's about 67% through the fiscal year and about 80% through the school year. First up is the dashboard. You can see enrollment was at 86 in April. This brought average annual FTE down to 107.5. As a reminder, our budget was for 136. So at this point, that's 21% variance, unfortunately. Public revenue, moving on, we've got public revenue. Right now, the result is higher than the goal. What happened is we passed that budget revise. The goal is based on the budget revise right now. So right now we're above the goal due to receiving the levy equalization payment in April, with the April apportionment. But we wanted to keep this red since, overall we are losing about $400,000 with that enrollment miss. And without levy equalization, this will be down to 63%. So we figured it was better to keep that red. Private revenues, we are above where we thought we would be. We've received a few additional private grants. But again, here, even though we're above the goal, it's red since the school needs additional funding to continue operations in the future. Expenditures compared to overall budget right now, we're higher than the 67% where we typically want to see. We do possibly anticipate not having, so this should be possibly no summer purchases, sorry about that, for this summer. So if the worst case scenario occurs and PCM does not reopen for 24-25, not having to make those purchases over the summer will smooth out that spending. Cash on hand right now is at 310K. That's 44. That equates to 44 days of cash on hand. For the end of the year, we are not projected to meet 30 days at this point, but we'll see how it all shakes out. Thankfully, with the large April apportionment, we were able to. We have a plan to limit the accounts payable that's paid each month, so that we can continue making payroll every month until the school year ends. I like to usually ask what May enrollment is or what the current month enrollment is, but there is no one from the school here, so I'm not sure if we have that information to discuss.
Kim, do you know? Okay.
I do not know what the current enrollment is for May of this year.
That's okay. Cash, as I mentioned, we received the levy equalization, the 140K, and that'll help us close out the fiscal year. And below, you can see some of the material variances listed. Legal, as we know, we've had some decent sized legal costs. Contracted services, we've had 2 temporary head of schools, and then classroom supplies. And we unfortunately received some invoices pretty late that we were not able to include in the budget. And then at this point in time, we have $30,000 of missing documentation, which means documentation has not been submitted to Jewel Growth. Does not mean that it does not exist somewhere on someone's email, for example, or something like that. But in any case, that's the dashboard. Let me know if you have any questions. Next, we have the budget status report.
Sorry, on the previous slide with the missing documentation, that's for the entire year, correct?
Yeah, exactly.
And Matt, has that stabilized? You know, we're interested in doing as little of that as possible.
Yeah, no, yeah, I believe that has stabilized. I can't remember. I should have looked. I apologize at what it was last month, but I believe it's lower than last month, but I'm not 100% sure. All right, moving on to the budget status report, also known as the budget to actual. We have not updated the forecast, and that happens quarterly. So next month when we meet, we'll have updated the forecast for Q3. Looks like local support is doing well. As Alan mentioned, there are a few events for fundraising, so that has pushed up this number up to 63%. So that's great. And we've actually beat the forecast. So as I mentioned, it just means we'll increase the forecast when we do the Q3 revision. General state revenues tracking well since we did the revised budget. If this was the original budget, no, we would not be at 67%. State revenues general purpose, we're a bit higher than where we thought we would be. I don't think we did not include the levy equalization in the revised budget, so that's why we're already higher here. It's 78% of the forecast. That's on track. That's good to see. Federal revenues at about 50%. The only warning is we may not be able to spend the full CSP grant depending on what happens regarding next school year. But in terms of other federal streams like Title I or special education, those are planned to be fully spent and claimed. Grants and other sources are mostly private grants. So it looks like we have landed a few additional grants even higher than our revised budget, so that's helpful. Moving on to expenses, as a reminder, we're 67% through the fiscal year, so that's kind of what we want to see for salaries. We are a bit higher there. But PCM does have a relatively large amount of hourly staff, so once the school year ends and hourly staff don't get paid while they're not working, that will normalize a bit. Same with taxes and benefits, contracted services. I've mentioned that some of these have gone up a bit compared to what was in the budget, especially the head of school support. So that's why that's a bit higher. School operations, 83% of the forecast, 92% of the revised budget already. I know we're very close to the end of the school year, so we should theoretically not see too many more of those expenses materialize. That is, unless 24, 25 happens and over the summer, in let's say July or August, we make purchases to prepare for 24, 25, then that number will possibly go over budget at that point. But in any case, we'll handle that if it occurs. Facility operations at 61% is a bit below budget, so it's good to see there at least. And overall, we're a little high, but as I mentioned, depending on what happens with summer purchases and with the amount of hourly staff that will stop working in the middle of June, this is not, it's reasonable, I would say. So if there are any questions, feel free to let me know. Next up,
Matt. Matt, does the CSP grant expire, or does it live on until we use it, if we're able to use it?
Yeah, so you're able to transfer, I believe, up to 10% of each year's award from one year to the next. So if there is some leftover funds at the end of this fiscal year, we can transfer them. So that's helpful.
Okay.
We were recently able to put in a revision to add a few more expenses in, so that will help on that front. So that'll be nice.
Okay.
Next up is the balance sheet. We discussed cash a bit. AR is almost non-existent at this point. prepaids will start dwindling down unless, we start making those 24, 25 purchases, as I mentioned. No fixed asset, except for a small $800 facility expense. AP, we saw a large AP run in April with the deposit of the apportionment near the end of the month, so that's down materially. But there are still some invoices in here that we would prefer to have paid than unpaid. But we are navigating the situation as best as we can. And then another thing I always look for is to make sure that the loan principal went down, so we know that we made our loan payments and that we're not out of compliance on that front. So it's good to see.
And then deferred rent liability, on the other hand, goes up because every month that passes, we have a larger balance deferred. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
That's it for me on the balance sheet, but let me know if you have any questions.
Hey, Kim, maybe can you go back to the balance sheet, Matt? I remember Kim had a couple of questions. Was one of them why cash jumped up so much, Kim? If it was, it's because we got a large apportionment income in the month of April, and our check runs didn't entirely exhaust it. And then you also had a question about accounts payable, large balance last month at the end of March, smaller balance at the end of April, because we were able to pay vendors. We were able to make a significant check run.
Exactly. And we're conserving this cash because the May apportionment and the June apportionment are the lowest of the year. So in April, you get 10%, for example, of your apportionment. In May and June, it's half of that. It's about 5% in May, maybe 6% in June. So we're saving some of this cash so we can make payroll and pay off our crucial vendors and whatnot. So that's why we are seeing a relatively higher cash balance than we've seen in prior months. We're safeguarding some of that cash.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving on to the payroll and AP certs. Payroll was down to 61.9 thousand. It's about 10 to 12K lower than last month. It's a bit interesting. AP was at 223, as we mentioned. We had a large AP run, and we'll see that list soon. Non-AP cash was at 1289, which is relatively low and very reasonable in my opinion. Next is the payroll summary. Usually leave this up for a few seconds. Feel free to always follow up after if you have questions on any of these lines by email or what have you. And here are the bill payments that were made in April.
So one of the questions that I had is why on the 26th, there are two payments of the same amount to both Jewel Growth Partners and True Measure Collaborative. Why was there what looks like double payments there?
So that's actually old. Those are old invoices that weren't paid on time. So there's like this. This is the March invoice for JGP, and this is the April, and same for TMC.
Okay. And I think that might address one of the questions from one of our esteemed guests. Do we ever defer payments to Jewel Growth Partners because of cash flow? And then that's a yes to Kim's question. And is that a conflict? I don't know the answer to that.
Another thing on the 29th, it shows a YMCA payment. Is that for payments that we were behind on, or is that a new payment for something, considering we're not using them anymore?
Well, it's a really good question. That's a great catch. Yeah, that's an old invoice. I believe it's from February.
Okay. All right. So
the Great Books Foundation that's 12 grand.
Yeah.
Was that an old invoice too, or?
Yeah, those are some old invoices as well. I believe one of them was as old as June 2023.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So they were one of the vendors we had to prioritize since the invoices were that old.
Matt,
What, sorry,
go ahead, Ken. This is your question.
What's the Wild Mutt Handyman Services one for the 30,000?
Yeah, so those are great. These are great. So that is the contractor that was doing renovation on the school for the new spaces that were going to be used. This was grant funded, so the amount of money we paid, we received from the organization that was grant funding the construction work. At least it was budget neutral.
So when is that invoice from, and when did we stop the construction on that?
The invoice, gosh, I could see. Let me see when the actual invoice is dated. Construction was stopped. Gosh, I have an email thread about that. It would
I
take
do
me a
too.
while.
I just can't place it.
Yeah.
Excuse me, this is Laura McCormick. So I guess as a person who's been to these meetings more than, well, other than Matt, I would say he's been here more than me, but I've been here probably the longest. And what I would say, with all due respect, it makes no sense to me in a cash-strapped school that we are not reporting bills that we aren't paying on time. And this is something that I have repeatedly asked about, and no one ever answers my questions. And I will say, Ellen, I really do appreciate both your demeanor and your willingness to have people ask questions, because I think part of how we got here, which I do think we should be looking at how we got here, is all of this mess. And so I know some about the person, the vendor, contractor, whoever that was hired to remodel that space. I will just humbly say, yeah, there's a lot to unpack with all that. And I would hope that somewhere in the board meeting or in this meeting that you all do that, because I really think that we need more conversation about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura.
Looks like the invoice was dated March 25th and March 18th. So there's two invoices that are comprising that total.
Okay.
And then what's the HCA SEBB one for the 45, almost 46?
Those are school employee benefits. So.
Oh. Okay.
That is the law in the book. And if you take that law as it's written, it was certainly in violation.
Someone's not muted.
So, I mean,
it's me. Sorry.
Oh, it's okay.
I apologize. Nobody's here, but somebody's talking. So sorry. Go ahead.
No problem. Any other questions on any of the bills?
Yeah.
Yeah, presence.
Go ahead, Cam.
What's the EIDE Bailey, I think it is, for the 7?
Yeah. That's the CPA audit cost. It's actually not so bad. It's lower than others.
Yeah. Matt, is that all there is, or is that like a progress billing?
It should be it.
Okay, so it's just $17,000 period. Okay, I think that was one of your questions, Laura, and I can be pretty confident saying this: we don't pay it. Well, in this case, we did pay it after an opinion, but we're not paying for a desired outcome with the opinion. There's potentially a conflict between not getting the opinion you want and withholding payment. I don't know if I'm saying that very well. But it looks like they billed us after they were finished. In my experience, sometimes they make progress billings beforehand. Okay, and Matt, do we do, we have an accounts payable aging, do we?
We do. It's not part of the typical board report though, but
okay.
Happy to share that if it's helpful.
It's probably something I can get to in QuickBooks, right?
Sure. Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So that would be a document we can produce that would show us late payments, past due invoices. There we go. Any other questions? I want to get to Laura's questions in the chat, but anybody else?
Yeah, sure. The Presence Learning, was that another unpaid one, or do we know?
Oh, yeah, that was multiple months of special education services there.
Okay.
How far behind are we on some of these payments still?
I know. Trying to think the best way to message this. I think maybe it makes sense to wait until, because I don't want to speak like out of turn. I want to make sure I have like, I can look in AP aging before I say anything that I'm not sure about.
Okay. All right. Any others? Excuse me. Forecast remaining legal bills. I don't have the answer to that offhand. However, as Matt mentioned, we do refresh the forecast each 3 months, every quarter. And I believe at the end of May, we'll refresh the forecast for the next finance committee meeting. Is that right, Matt?
Correct.
Okay. All right. I don't want to overcommit you guys. I don't know how long it takes you, but that will be coming up. Forecast for remaining legal bills. Missing documentation. I'm not quite sure how to field that one.
Let's see. Why isn't it resolved? I mean, I don't know if I should answer that.
Rephrase the question again.
It's why isn't the missing documentation resolved?
Yeah, for anything from the past, I mean, that would be a question for past management, right? So that would be up to, the person who would have the answer is not here.
Yes, that is true. Yeah, that's if we have any missing documentation contemporaneously, like currently, I won't say that makes me more concerned. It's possibly more within my sphere of vision. Not having been here in previous years, it's not a great answer.
I know some of it is like timing. We get, say someone makes a purchase near the end of the month, we get the credit card statement, we record all the expenses, and staff haven't had time to send us receipts yet because they just made the purchase, and it was kind of a timing thing. I mean, prioritization by previous staff, obviously comes into play. We cannot dictate how people spend their time and what they work on, unfortunately. So it's out of our control.
And just theoretically,
excuse me, with all due respect. So this has been a very serious problem for a very long time. And I know, because I've been coming to these meetings, there's nothing in the minutes. They weren't recorded. I don't understand why we're paying for 2 head of schools when evidently we've still got about 30 grand where I guess we don't have the receipts. That would seem to me to be a really big deal.
Fair enough, although that's pretty far beyond the scope of this committee. But I understand your question, and it's a good one.
How often are we audited for?
You're audited by independent CPAs once per year by the state government. I know we have been since I've joined the board, but I'm not sure how frequently. Bill, Matt, Katie, do you know the answer to that?
Also once per year. Okay. And they also review all of the independent audit work as well.
Okay.
So is this charge from an old invoice, or because I know that if I remember right, a month or 2 ago, we had a charge for that as well.
Yeah, the last month's meeting, we had about a $22,000 charge, if my memory is correct, from the state. And then this one, I Bailey, is our independent CPAs.
They'll often divide it up into one or two bill, or sorry, I guess you wouldn't divide it up into one bill. That makes no sense. They would often divide it up into two bills.
Okay.
So, you might see it on back-to-back months, or across, 2 times in 3 or 4 months.
Okay. Answer your question, Kim? Okay. On the missing documentation, I will add this just theoretically. If it's occasional, then like I said, we're humans. There will be control deficiencies. If it's rampant or widespread, then it escalates into a more significant problem. But for this year, we wouldn't likely open up a previous year that's already been audited and do reviews of it without a strong indication of a reason to do that. That's kind of what I was fumbling for when I say contemporaneously. Our agenda here is this fiscal year's financials. So-
To your point, how much of the missing documentation relates to this year and how much of it is previous years? I think it's important, from my limited understanding, external auditors are not focused on identifying fraud. So they're taking the representations of management and
Yes.
relying on the design of the internal control and the governance documents. And many people are aware, I've asked a lot of questions about contracts and contract compliance and why terms of contracts weren't followed. Now that you're listening to my voice, you're hearing me talk about the fact that I was asking about all these undocumented transactions. This was never like, gee, we had 2,000 in undocumented transactions. This was double digits all the time. I know. So I think this is a very concerning issue and one that should be elevated. Thank you.
Got it, Laura. Thank you. And for previous years, I can't help with that. We could do a forensic audit if there were strong indication for a reason for it, which would involve statistically sampling invoices and figuring out how prevalent that practice is. If it's still happening this year, then that tells me get involved in a whole different way. So please keep asking. That's not a complete answer, nor probably what you're looking for, but it's where I'm at. Okay. Other questions?
Yeah, thank you. I just don't want you to think I'm being rude, but I got to catch the bus. I really do appreciate your commitment to transparency and to listening. I really do. Okay?
Okay, and know that that's part of our control is you asking these questions, so I appreciate it. Okay, any other questions? Matt, Katie, Bill, thank you. And at this next board meeting, I'll try to read the boilerplate that the board needs to approve with a little more alacrity than I did last time.
No worries.
Okay, on to preparation of the 24-25 budget and 5-year forecast. Now, it's absolutely true that we do not know what next year is going to look like. However, a cadre of us who have agreed to start putting together the 24-25 budget, that is, and we're all 4 here, Caitlin and Kim, are representatives also, officers of the SCC. I'm not sure if you have ever been involved in budgeting. And Dave, I really appreciate you taking the ball with some of the more complex parts of it, enrollment and so on. And we have a lot to learn. We haven't been through this before at the school. I've done plenty of budgeting, and Dave has too. Maybe you and Caitlin, you and Kim have too, but not in this context. So we've got a lot to learn. Therefore, we're getting a nice early start. Again, we don't know what next year's going to look like, but we have agreed. I say we, Kim and I have. Let's see, Caitlin and Dave, if you feel the same. We really need to get started even amidst the uncertainty, because if we wait, we're going to be in a rush. Okay, thank you. The general timeline for that, assuming we have a school year next year, would be July 10th is when a draft is due to the commission. And I have proposed to this group of 5 of us, Kim, Caitlin, Dave, me, and Angel Growth Partners, a schedule that leads us to that point. It starts with budget templates that we can fill in, and I started on those yesterday. I didn't finish them like I said I would. My apologies. And then we will have some short, impactful meetings amongst a lot of us as we go along to help understand where we're going, questions, and so on. And then the final budget will need to be approved, will need to be into the board commission, Mercy, around the end of August. And two of the gates along the way is board approval of where we are, and that would be of the preliminary or the draft and also the final. And the regular board meeting falls about a week or 10 days before that deadline, the 10th of June, maybe even a little before that. So we'll have some time, and I'm glad. And thank you, all of you, for being part of this process. Typically, I think in the past, it's been a collaboration with the head of school and Geo Growth Partners. We're just broadening it a little bit this time. At some point, this will revert to management, or it should. I'm here for governance, but in the interim, as we noted in our board meeting, crossing the line into management activities a bit. Questions on that? 24-25 budget and 5-year forecast? Okay. Caitlin, you all done with your parts? Me either. Okay. Discussion. We are through our agenda, and it is, oh my gosh, it's 6. Where did the time go? Well, then it's time to adjourn. I adjourn this meeting, and I thank all of you.
Yeah. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.